I've recently rewatched the anime Death Note for the first time as an adult, and something quickly becomes apparent, which is the absolutely terrible way the women characters are treated. I don't believe any of these characters are badly written, it's just that when you stack their storylines on top of one another, you start to notice some things. We'll start with Misa Amane. When she first enters the story, she's very competent, seems to have control over the situation, and Misa comes up with this evil genius mastermind plan. However, she quickly devolved into a silly, immature goofball that gets captured by the task force. The task force, hunting Light, finds out who she is, what she's doing, and even points out all of her mistakes along the way. After her intro, the rest of Misa's story is about her offering herself up as a tool to be used by Light. The story also frequently points out how absolutely desirable Misa is to both the human characters and actual gods of death. Next up is Light's mother. Yeah, she's just kinda there sometimes. Next up is actually Light's sister, Saiyu Yagami. During the first half of the show, Sayu's a typical younger sibling type character. She doesn't have much of an impact on the story. During the second part of the story, she briefly returns. The story acknowledges how hot Saiyu grew up because that's important for us, the audience, to know, and then she's immediately kidnapped. We don't get to see the long term effects of her traumatic experience, how it affects Light, how it affects their father, or how it even affects her. It's just a very short term plot point that happens in the overall story. Next up is Kiyomi Tsikata. During the first half of the anime, she is unknowingly being used by Light. He needs to appear as a normal teenager going to school and going on dates, and that's the purpose she serves for him. After the time skip, however, she completely and totally offers herself up as a tool to be used by Light, which ultimately leads Kiyomi to her death. Finally, we get to Naomi Misora, one of the more competent characters in all of the story. She quickly represents herself as a threat to Light. She will without a doubt figure out who Kira is and or lead the task force to his identity. My only real issue with this character is that she's brought into the story by a man, she's taken out of the story by a man, and Naomi's motivations are completely centered around men. There are a few other women characters, but they aren't really worth mentioning, like Weddy, who is hired by L and killed by Light. The women characters in Death Note simply aren't giving their own motivations, or the motivations they do have are centered around men. They consistently offer themselves up as tools to be used and experience traumatic events to push the story forward. All in all, Death Note is a great anime, highly recommended. I simply wanted to point out some trends that I noticed with the characters. I don't think the treatment of the women characters is even that big of a deal, really. I mean, it's an entire story about death, lies, manipulation, and ultimately, in some ways, failure. But thanks for listening to me fire some thoughts off into the internet, and please comment any thoughts of your own. Thank you for listening.